The American Revolution explained how the USA broke free from British rule. The American Revolution was not a sudden explosion of rebellion, but a long, complicated awakening that unfolded over years of tension, debate, sacrifice, and hard choices. Beginning in the mid-18th century, when Britain's North American colonies were still proud to call themselves British subjects, loyal to the crown, yet increasingly uneasy about how they were being governed from across the Atlantic. Because after the costly 7 Years' War, known in America as the French and Indian War, the British government faced enormous debt and looked to the colonies to help pay it, leading Parliament to impose a series of new taxes and regulations, such as the Stamp Act, the Townshend Duties, and later the Tea Act, measures that were legal under British law but deeply resented in America because colonists had no representatives in Parliament and believed these taxes violated long-held English rights, a grievance that crystallized in the powerful slogan, "No taxation without representation," which echoed through taverns, newspapers, and town meetings and transformed everyday economic complaints into a broader constitutional argument about liberty and consent. As resistance grew, it took many forms beyond street protests, including pamphlets, boycotts of British goods, and the formation of groups like the Sons of Liberty, while colonial leaders such as Samuel Adams and Patrick Henry argued that unchecked government power was a threat to freedom, ideas influenced by Enlightenment thinkers like John Locke, whose writings suggested that governments existed to protect natural rights and could be overthrown if they failed to do so. A radical notion that slowly took root among farmers, merchants, artisans, and intellectuals alike. British authorities, for their part, saw colonial defiance as dangerous and unlawful, responding with measures like the Intolerable Acts after the Boston Tea Party in 1773, which closed Boston Harbor and curtailed self-government in Massachusetts. Actions meant to restore order, but which instead convinced many colonists that compromise was slipping away, leading to the convening of the First Continental Congress, where delegates from 12 colonies gathered not to declare independence yet, but to coordinate resistance and assert their rights as Englishmen. The situation finally turned violent in April 1775 at Lexington and Concord, where British troops sent to seize colonial weapons clashed with local militia. Shots were fired, lives were lost, and the conflict crossed a point of no return, even though at that stage many colonists still hoped for reconciliation rather than separation. When the Second Continental Congress met, it found itself managing a war while also trying to define what the colonies were fighting for, appointing George Washington as commander of the Continental Army, a strategic choice meant to unify the colonies and lend credibility to the cause. Yet Washington faced enormous challenges, including poorly trained troops, shortages of supplies, and the daunting task of standing up to the world's most powerful military. Over time, however, events and ideas pushed the colonies toward independence, especially the publication of Thomas Paine's pamphlet Common Sense in early 1776, which spoke in plain language to ordinary people, arguing that monarchy was an absurd and corrupt system and that America's destiny lay in self-government, a message that resonated widely and helped shift public opinion toward a complete break with Britain. That momentum culminated in July 1776 when the Continental Congress adopted the Declaration of Independence, primarily drafted by Thomas Jefferson, a document that did more than announce a political separation by laying out a philosophical justification rooted in the belief that all men are created equal and endowed with unalienable rights. A statement that was aspirational and imperfect given the continued existence of slavery and exclusion of women and Native Americans, but nonetheless revolutionary in its assertion that legitimate government derives its power from the consent of the governed. Declaring independence did not win the war, however, and the years that followed were marked by hardship, uncertainty, and brutal fighting, with British forces capturing major cities like New York and Philadelphia, while Washington's army endured freezing winters, such as the infamous encampment at Valley Forge, where disease and hunger claimed more lives than battle, but where discipline and training improved under leaders like Baron von Steuben, strengthening the army's ability to fight as a professional force. The war itself was as much a civil conflict as an international one, pitting loyalists who remained faithful to the crown against patriots who supported independence, dividing families and communities and leading to violence beyond the battlefield, while enslaved people faced wrenching choices, as British promises of freedom attracted many to flee plantations and join the British side, highlighting the deep contradictions within a revolution that spoke of liberty while tolerating human bondage. A turning point came in 1777 with the American victory at Saratoga, where British General John Burgoyne's surrender convinced France that the American cause was viable, prompting France to enter the war openly in 1778, a decisive development because French money, weapons, naval power, and military expertise transformed the conflict into a global struggle and forced Britain to fight on multiple fronts. With French support and later assistance from Spain and the Netherlands, the Americans gained crucial advantages, culminating in the 1781 siege of Yorktown, where Washington's forces, combined with French troops and backed by a French naval blockade, trapped British General Cornwallis, leading to his surrender and effectively ending major combat operations, even though formal peace would not come until the Treaty of Paris in 1783. In which Britain officially recognized the independence of the United States. Winning independence, however, raised a new and daunting question: how to govern a nation born in rebellion, as the initial framework under the Articles of Confederation created a weak central government that struggled with debt, interstate disputes, and foreign pressures, prompting debates that revealed lingering fears of centralized power, but also growing recognition that unity was necessary for survival. These debates led to the Constitutional Convention of 1787, where delegates crafted a new constitution designed to balance authority and liberty through checks and balances, separation of powers, and federalism, ideas shaped by the revolutionary experience and by lessons learned from British rule. And although the Constitution faced intense opposition from those who feared it gave too much power to the federal government, its supporters promised amendments to protect individual rights, resulting in the Bill of Rights, which enshrined freedoms of speech, religion, and due process, principles that trace their lineage directly to the grievances that sparked the revolution. In hindsight, historians often emphasize that the American Revolution was not just a war for independence, but a broader transformation in political thought, one that challenged traditional notions of monarchy and empire and inspired future movements around the world, even as modern scholars also stress its limitations and contradictions, noting that freedom was unevenly distributed and that many Americans, including enslaved Africans, native nations, and women, continued to fight for rights long after independence was secured. Still, the revolution's legacy lies in its enduring ideas as much as its military victories, reminding us that the United States was born from argument as well as arms, from ideals tested by reality, and from a belief, however imperfectly realized, that ordinary people could claim the right to govern themselves. And that is something worth remembering whenever we reflect on how fragile and hard-won freedom can be.